Welcome to Purpose After Sports, where we share athletes' journeys and explore how they are reinventing what it means to compete. Today, I am lucky enough to be here with Alan Stein Jr. He is a former basketball performance coach and has had 20 years of experience working with the best players and coaches in the game. He is now a keynote speaker and author, helping leaders and teams apply the same strategies that elite athletes use to perform at a world-class level. So you may know him from his book, Raise Your Game, and he has a new one coming out very soon called Next Play. Alan's journey from the court to the stage is incredible, but what really stands out to us is his ability to translate lessons from sport into life, leadership, and everyday growth. Alan, thank you very much for being on here with us today.
My pleasure. I'm excited to be here.
I want to start right away into basketball because you've talked about that being one of your first passions and loves. What can you share with us the role basketball played in shaping who you are now?
Well, yeah, I'm so grateful that something that I fell in love with at 5 years old is still a really important part of my life and still really a driving passion in my life. And I've been able to not only make a living but build an extraordinary life around the game that I love, and that still kind of connects me to that childhood exuberance that I had when I first picked up a ball. And yeah, and my relationship with basketball has certainly iterated and changed. I mean, for the first third of my life, I was a very dedicated basketball player. And then for kind of the next section, Act Two, I was a very dedicated basketball performance coach. And now in Act Three, the current iteration, I'm both the father of young kids that play basketball, but it's also kind of the central theme into everything I share on stage and on page. And really that's what I try and do is translate the lessons that I've learned through sport and through basketball and teach folks how to apply those to their businesses, into their lives. So while I don't want to be a one-trick pony, and the stuff that I
Yeah.
write about and I speak about certainly is broader than just basketball, but if you ever were to attend one of my keynotes or read any of my books, you'd see very quickly that like this guy loves basketball. So I'm actually very grateful.
Was it always basketball? I know that you talked about kind of dabbling in other sports as well. When did you know, okay, I want to take basketball to the next level?
Yeah, when I was really young, I played just about every sport you could think of and did a variety of even different activities that weren't directly related to sport. I mean, I did martial arts, I was into skateboarding and BMX biking, certainly did the traditional basketball, football, soccer, many of those team sports. But as I started to get into high school, I really realized that while I enjoyed those other activities, I loved basketball. So that's when I
Yeah.
decided to go all in, and I made the commitment that I wanted to try to be able to play the game in college. And I knew that in order to have a chance to do that, I would need singular focus and spend all of my time working on my basketball game. And, towards the latter part of high school, and then while I was in college, and I was fortunate enough to play at Elon, a small school down in North Carolina. But during that time, I started to develop an equal love for the strength and conditioning side of the game, for the training, which we now call performance work. But
Yeah.
lifting weights and the agilities and the plyometrics and the conditioning, I really started to have a strong fascination in that initially because it was all stuff I was doing to improve my athleticism and get me in good shape. But then I realized that it was something that I was just really intrigued by. So when I graduated from Elon and realized that I was not going to be able to play the game professionally, I figured what could be better than combining this original love of basketball with this newfound love of basketball strength and conditioning, and kind of combining the two. So when I graduated, I mean, there was really only one choice for me, and that was to be a basketball performance coach. And really, really enjoyed my time in that space, learned a lot, loved every minute of it, really loved the relationships. And as you mentioned in the intro, I did that for just under 20 years before I decided to leave that space and pursue what I'm doing now, which is corporate keynote speaking and writing.
Well, you led right into my next question of what drew you to performance training. I think it keeps us really close to the game and allows us to kind of share that knowledge we had. So you worked along with some of the best, if not the best. What are some lessons from the court side that still shape you into who you are today that you learned from maybe skills training?
Yeah, well, there's probably 20 different attributes or lessons that I probably use fairly regularly in my life and try to live and try to model. But I'll narrow it down to just a very small handful. You know, one of the most impactful lessons that I ever learned was back in 2007 when I worked the Nike Skills Academy, and I had a chance to meet Kobe Bryant for the first time. And I watched one of his private workouts, and remember at the time being a young coach, being very surprised that he was doing very basic drills. Now, he was doing them with incredible intensity and incredible focus and incredible precision, but he wasn't doing anything flashy. He was just drilling down on the fundamentals. And, you know, at the time, I felt he was the best player in the world. So it actually surprised me that a player of his stature would be working on the fundamentals. And when I asked him about it, his answer to that was, well, the best never get bored with the basics. And ever since that day, that's been kind of my foundational mantra. I mean, for those that are watching this interview, you can see the sign above my head that says Success Simplified. To me, I believe that the essence of excellence or greatness in any area of our life is our ability to get back to the basics, to focus on the fundamentals, to untether from anything that's unnecessarily complex, and to do everything in our power to simplify success. I do believe that most of us, and I certainly put myself in this camp for most of my life, make success way more complicated than it needs to be. Now, one
Yeah.
important disclaimer to make with that is the distinction between basic and easy. Those are not synonyms, and yet people often use those words as if they mean the same thing, but they don't. What
Yeah.
it takes to be elite is very basic in principle, but it's incredibly hard to actually do. That's why very few people are elite in any area of life. So to me, I don't want to make things any harder than they need to be. So whether I'm trying to improve as a father, improve as a speaker, improve as a business owner, my goal is to figure out what are the handful of fundamentals that lead to excellence in this area, and how can I work towards mastery of those things during the unseen hours. And that's really my recipe that I preach and teach both on stage and on page to anyone that will listen.
No, I'm like wanting to take notes as you speak. I think that is super important because we can read all these things about how to be successful, and there's this list that you're supposed to follow. But as you said, you simplify it to the easiest form. It's doing the easy things, mundane things over and over and over again, that kind of separate you. But it takes a lot of work depending on how far you want to go.
Yeah, and we need
Uh,
consistency with those things. To me, consistency and discipline are two controllable superpowers. And really, the way I try and view everything is I go all the way to the end and say, what is the most simplified definition of success or definition of winning in this specific area? And then under that, then start to unpack it and reverse engineer it. So I'll give you two examples. One, you know, the game of basketball. The game of basketball, I mean, the entire premise is to score more points than your opponent and to have more
right,
points than they have when the final, buzzer goes off. All right. No one argues that. All right. Well, then one layer down, what do we need to do to greatly increase the chance that our team will have more points than our opponent? Well, if we really break it down, there's only two things that you need to do. On offense, you need to take the highest percentage shot possible. And on defense, you need to make your opponent take the lowest percentage shot possible. If you do those two things, you will win the overwhelming majority of your games. Now,
right.
obviously, for anyone that follows basketball, it's not quite that simple. There's some nuance to what does it mean to take the highest percentage shot possible. And we could probably list four or five things, but in general, it's get your better shooters the ball in spots where they'll be open and can make shots, like as a broad definition. And then obviously on the defensive end is make your opponent take really difficult shots that are heavily guarded from spots that they don't feel comfortable. All right, so now we're working our way down, but then we could probably figure out five or six things to get our best shooters the ball in the spots where they're most comfortable, and five or six things to make our opponent shoot the ball from where they're uncomfortable. All right, so that's how we work down. Well, it's same thing. Let's just say someone listening or watching this right now wants to get in better physical condition. All right, well, there's primarily two things you need to do. You need to eat a clean diet and you need to move your body. End
Mhm.
of category, those are the basics. Now, of course, there's some nuance. What does it mean to eat a clean diet? Well, there's probably 5 or 6 things that go into that. And well, just move your body. Well, no, it's not that simple. There's got to be some structure to it, but there's probably
Yeah.
5 or 6 things that we could say, move your body with some resistance training, move your body with some cardiovascular training, move your body to improve flexibility and mobility. So there's, and we just work our way down. And I could do the exact same thing for being a speaker, being an author, being a father, any of these areas of my life. I start with the end in mind, simplify it as much as possible, and then I reverse engineer and go layer by layer. And then when I get down to about the third or fourth layer, where I've got 5 or 6 things that will lead to that as the result, those are the 5 or 6 things I work on. Those are the 5 or 6 things I focus on, because that's the process. I no longer focus on the goal. I focus on doing those 5 or 6 things with incredible discipline and unbelievable consistency, because those are 2 things I have control over. And I try to make my discipline and my consistency my real life superpowers.
I think you kind of hit on it in that is, as people and even as athletes, we can make things, we just see that goal and then it just seems too overwhelming. Like we get started, we're ready, we have all these things that we need. And then it's just like, oh, I can't do that. I see the work that it's going to take. And like you said, break, okay, let's take away from the goal. Let's break down its simplest form what you have to do. Okay. And now we have a game plan of, there's a couple other things that need to get done, but that way you're not just focused on that huge thing at the very end. So I think that's going to be very tangible for our audience. I wanted to talk about in the book for raising your game. You said repetition is not punishment. It's the most effective form of learning. And as former athletes or as athletes, we hear that constantly, repetition, repetition. Can we unpack that now for maybe people outside of sports or just everyday people? What does repetition really mean, and not just boring and draining?
Yeah, well, repetition basically means it's doing the work, and doing the work over and over, and doing the work over and over while you're getting feedback, so that you can consistently iterate and tweak and make improvements, so that you're getting better. Because with that being true, if repetition is what's going to form lasting habits and form outcomes, then we need to make sure that we're performing good repetitions. The saying we would say in basketball is, you can get really good at bad shooting. If you're shooting correct mechanics or incorrect form, if you do it over and over, you're going to get really good at doing something the wrong way. So it's
Yeah,
important. An important asterisk to that is to make sure that you have competent coaching, and you have competent teachers, and you have feedback loops, and you're doing things correctly, whether you're watching yourself on film or you actually have a trainer or a coach, but you want to be doing it correctly. If you're in the gym, it's not good enough just to do lunges. You need to do lunges correctly. If you're doing
yeah,
them correctly, then you might actually be doing more harm than good. But once we've whittled down to making sure that mechanically we're doing things the right way, then it's just a matter of doing it over and over and over, for it to really stick, and for us to get better at anything. And it's true in every single area of our life. I mean, I'm a better speaker today than I was 10 years ago, for no other
yeah.
fact other than the fact that I've given hundreds and hundreds of keynotes since then, and those repetitions start to add up. So we get good at whatever we practice. And that's the thing, is I always try and remind folks with that quote, is many times, and it's especially young people, but old people as well, tend to think that, going out and making 200 jump shots is a form of punishment, and it's not. Going out and
Yeah.
making 200 jump shots is an opportunity for you to get better at your craft, for you to get better at the art of shooting a basketball. And you should embrace that, and you should want to do that, because that's how we get better. And one other thought: when we outsource, or at least attempt to outsource our repetitions, then we start to atrophy. And that's one of the red flags that I see now with AI, is so many people, especially in the content creation world, are outsourcing all of their thinking and all of their writing, and everything that they produce, they're outsourcing to AI, which
Yeah.
can appreciate and understand. And I use AI as a supplemental tool to what I do. And I do believe in embracing technology. But if you want to be a good writer, and you no longer actually write or flex your brain muscle to write, you do everything through AI, you'll probably become less creative. You'll probably become a less effective writer over time.
Yeah.
It's the thought process of, you can't pay someone to do your push-ups for you. If you want to get stronger, you're the only one that can do your push-ups, and you need to do them. And that's kind of how I approach everything.
You sprinkled in there a little bit about feedback, and you talk about that in some of your speeches and in the book that I was able to read. Why is feedback and getting feedback from trusted people so important? And how has that helped shape the way you've become as a speaker and keep continuing to grow?
Well, in any area of our life, whether we're identifying as an athlete or a speaker or a mother or father or whatever, we only see the world through our lens. And
Yeah,
each of us sees the world through a very biased lens, understandably. And that lens is heavily biased based on a variety of characteristics, all the way from, where we were born to who we were raised by, to what we were taught when we were younger, to who our current friend circle is, to what we read, watch, and listen to. All of this stuff shapes the way that we see the world. I don't remember who said this quote originally, but certainly not mine, but it's, we don't see the world as it is. We see the world as we are, which is why
mm,
you and I could read or watch or listen to something, the same thing, but you and I could have a very different interpretation of what that means. We could have,
right.
we might pull different lessons from it. You might say, hey, that thing was really good. And I go, man, that thing was awful. We have different opinions, and there's nothing wrong with that. But the point is, we see the world through a very specific lens. And the most important part about feedback is getting different perspectives to be shared with us. Now, if we're talking about specific feedback like shooting a jump shot, then obviously we need to make sure that the person that is offering the feedback is competent in understanding the mechanics of how to shoot a jump shot. I
Right.
wouldn't just go up and ask a random stranger off the street to give me feedback on my jump shot. I need to make sure that that person is qualified and competent to offer that type of feedback. And it's the same in any area of life. So we have to have very high discernment on who we get feedback from. And we need feedback that is mechanical and constructive, not feedback that is simply opinion based. If you tell me that you don't really like the color of my shirt, that's okay. You're entitled to your opinion, but that
Yeah.
feedback doesn't do anything to help me. Now, if I met with someone who is a video specialist and they said that, well, Alan, actually, when you're doing a podcast, it would be better for you to wear a different color shirt for this very specific reason, the way that it shows up on camera or because of your background. Well, that's a completely different case, because now in
Mm,
that case, there's a justification. It's not a matter of opinion. It's them offering their professional expertise on how I could have up-leveled my ability to be on a video podcast based on the color of my shirt. So those two things are very different. So what's really important is we have very high discernment in who we get feedback from and what we use that feedback to do. But what it does is it helps expose our blind spots. If I'm going back to the jump shot example, if I'm working on my jump shot, I'm only seeing it through the lens of the first person of what I'm seeing and feeling kinesthetically. I can't
yeah.
really see it the way I'm a bystander from afar, and getting that type of feedback is incredibly important. So I may be shooting shot after shot and not realizing that my feet aren't square to the basket unless a coach or a trainer or even film says, hey, Alan, your feet are not square to the basket. You need to make this adjustment with your hips or whatever. So that's why we need feedback.
And you talk about how important feedback is. So we get the feedback from that credible person or maybe a couple credible people. And you also dive into how important being coachable is. So we get that good feedback. Maybe it's not something we like to hear because innately we're, protective. We don't want to normally change. Some things are set in stone. So talk to us and guide us through being coachable outside of sport and how taking things that maybe are not so great or we don't want to hear, and it's important to still implement those things.
What we need to do is we just need to change our working definition and our emotional connotation with some of these different words. Um,
Yeah.
for me, and we all have some level of defensiveness and protective mechanism when someone is offering constructive feedback. That's human nature because, of course, in our mind, we're doing it the best we can. We're trying the best that we can. And when someone steps in and makes us feel like we're not doing a very good job as human beings, that can sometimes be hard to swallow. So I have
Yeah.
nothing but compassion. And certainly there are moments where I'm triggered and I feel that way as well. But what I've learned to do is take a deep breath and remind myself that feedback is actually a gift. Feedback
Hmm.
is something that we should crave, something we should welcome, something we should embrace. So if I were to give a keynote speech and then I were to ask a speaking coach or a professional speaker to break it down and offer me feedback, if they said something, yeah, in the moment, it might sting a little bit. I might feel like it's a personal attack, but I've learned, at least at this point in my life, to detach from those feelings and say, okay,
Yeah.
I appreciate you caring enough to be honest with me, and I appreciate you sharing that. Let's discuss it further. And then the most important part about feedback is, not only being willing to be open and accepted and discern on who we should listen to and who we shouldn't, but then we actually have to change our behavior moving forward. You know, if
Yeah.
if a professional lighting and video coach tells me that wearing a light gray shirt is not in my best interest on videos, and then I continue to wear it over and over, well, then I shouldn't be surprised if I don't get the result that I was hoping for. So the next
Yeah.
thing, feedback, is we have to be willing to implement it and execute and make some changes to apply it. That's how we actually get better. So all of this is kind of the perfect storm of what we need to do with feedback, but it all starts with an openness to hear it and an openness to accept it, and then make those crucial changes moving forward.
Yeah, because I think that It it's could seem like second nature to former or current athletes because 'cause we're so used to getting coached, right? And constantly getting feedback, but that still doesn't mean you might be good at it. How are you responding when that coach is giving you that feedback? And then it's gonna continue to happen and maybe not in the best fashion in whatever career you decide to afterwards. So, realizing that that coaching mentality is gonna keep coming, and you have to be able to like, your method you said was taking a deep breath. Whatever you find to first center yourself, realize, "Okay, what can I take out of this?" And maybe the delivery or something, um, that I can implement, and like you said, I think you said it in one of the Penn State talk or something, just repeatedly doing something is just you that's not gonna benefit you is
Like,
close to
yeah,
stupidity.
what I actually said, it's stupid. I mean, I like the alliteration because during that talk, I was talking about three behaviors that make someone selfish, and that's being soft, being silent, and being stupid. And in this
Yes,
definition, and I made sure that I put the context in when I was talking to the team that I'm
yes.
calling you a stupid human being, but anyone that does the same thing over and over that doesn't work, by definition, is making a stupid decision momentarily. But the other half of this, and this is the half that I'm also on a lot of times, is the person that's offering the feedback. It's really important with how you choose to share and what you choose to share. If
Yeah.
if I'm your coach and I don't think you're giving your best effort, you know, which of these do you think would get a better response? The first is I roll my eyes and I just say, "You are so lazy." That's one way of telling you that I don't think you're working hard. Or another way would say, like, I think you're capable of more than what you're doing right now. In fact, I've seen you give a better effort, and I really want to encourage you to try a little bit harder because I know you have it in you, and I know that you're capable of this, and I believe in you. And right now, you're shortchanging yourself and you're shortchanging us because I don't think you're giving the effort you're capable of. Like, both of them, I'm trying to communicate the same message, which is I don't
Right.
think you're giving a good effort. But my guess would be the latter would get a much better response from the athlete that I'm working with, would get them almost to want to lean in and want to work harder, as opposed to the first one, which sounds very judgmental, sounds very critical, sounds very condemning, where the other one sounds more encouraging and empowering. So a lot of it also is when we're the ones offering the feedback, is we need to deliver it in a way that will be most receptive, delivering it in a way that will, lower their defensiveness and lower their, trying to shield off of it and get the response that we're hoping we get.
I would agree. I think it's I'll give some coaches the benefit of the doubt as they would love to go in that direction. And a lot of coaching is heat of the moment kind of situations. And so we can have that drive to deliver such a good message, and then, mistake after mistake or games on the line, and we end up delivering it just your first way and how it probably shouldn't have been. So I think, like you said, coaches can take um things from this as well. Of your thing might be a deep breath too, of okay, now I need to realize that I'm just again relaying the same message over and over again. That athlete or that person is not going to get anything from it if I can't change the way I'm delivering it.
Yeah.
So
And also as coaches and as trainers and as leaders and as teachers and as parents, uh, we have to remember that our emotions are designed to inform us. They're not designed to direct us. And
mm,
if we allow our emotions to hijack how we treat others and what we say and our decision making or the way we communicate, then we're going to be inconsistent and ineffective as leaders. So there's nothing wrong with feeling every emotion on our emotional wheel. Like we have all of these emotions for a reason. And there's nothing wrong with feeling frustrated, disappointed, irritated, angry. We have those feelings for a reason. But if you allow those feelings to drive the way you speak to others or the way you treat others or the way you coach someone, then like I said, you're going to be inconsistent and ineffective. So a really elite level coach will be able to say in the moment, I am so frustrated that Mikki keeps making this mistake over and over, but I'm not going to allow my frustration to taint my communication or my ability to offer feedback or to blur the lines of making sure she knows how much I care about her and her performance. They're able to separate the two. And to me, that is what an elite level coach or leader would do. And it's something I've really had to work on because I will fully acknowledge, I consistently allowed myself to be emotionally hijacked, in my 20s and 30s and even in my early 40s. And, I would wear my colors on my sleeve and I would wear my emotions on my sleeve. And however I was feeling is how I would behave. And because
yeah.
as human beings, our emotions are always going to ebb and flow, then that just means the way we show up in the world and the way we behave is also going to ebb and flow. And I don't want that for me as a human being. To me, I want to be very consistent and I always want to perform to a standard of excellence and to my core values, not based on how I feel in the moment. So whatever mood I'm in is irrelevant. I want the people around me or the audience, that I'm speaking to, that it doesn't matter how I feel. I'm going to deliver because I live to a standard. I don't live to a mood.
I really like what you talk about in your book and in your speeches talking about emotion, because again, it's something that can seem like we already know as athletes, but it's not. It's all body language. It's all things that we constantly have to work on, because it's something that we can control. But like you said, you should still allow it, right? That anger tells you, okay, I made a mistake. You should probably be a little bit upset that you made that mistake or that you did something that you knew you weren't supposed to do. Okay. But now I can control how I address it and move forward and maybe not continue to make that mistake.
Yes, you're 100% correct. I want to feel every emotion. I will never, ever recommend that somebody suppress or resist or ignore their feelings. But there is a difference between feeling angry and behaving in an angry manner. There's a difference between being upset that you just missed the wide open shot and then allowing that to dictate what you do on the very next play. So to me,
Right.
it's a matter of separating feelings and behaviors. And that is the ultimate sign of someone that has the maturity and the emotional agility to regulate their emotions. Yes, I absolutely would expect for a player to be upset if they missed a wide open shot. They've probably spent hundreds of hours practicing that shot, and then to miss
Yeah.
it when it really counts with a lot of people watching. Of course, I want them to be upset, but I do not want that upset feeling to dictate their behavior on the next play or dictate what they say to the ref or dictate how they show up for their teammates or their coaches. So the separation of the two is really, really important.
Do you have any tools or things that you've recommended in your sport coaching days that when they make that, do you recommend still a deep breath for others or finding something that works?
I can't think of a time in our life where taking a deep breath would not serve us. So,
Right.
yeah, in almost every single instance, and I'm saying this as I smile because it's something I have to say to myself 100 times a day to remind myself is to slow down.
Yeah.
There's always going to be a moment between circumstances and events and our response. And in that moment is our chance to choose the response that we want to have. But if we react impulsively and emotionally to everything that goes on in our life, once again, we're most likely going to make some pretty poor decisions, say some pretty bad things, and we're going to be very inconsistent and ineffective. Whereas if we can learn to just even momentarily go, okay, I don't like what just happened, but how can I respond or show up now in this moment? And really, at the risk of sounding self-serving and promoting the new book, that's the whole point of Next Play. The entire
Yeah.
Next Play is to stop worrying about what just happened and refocus your lens on what is happening right now. What's the very next thing? So Next Play is being able to say, I'm angry, I'm irritated, I'm frustrated, I'm disappointed, but that's not my next step in life is not going to be a reflection of how I'm feeling. My next step in life is going to be very purposeful, very intentional, and it's going to be a thought out response. And like anything, we can condition ourselves to getting better at those things. The same things that used to irritate me and annoy me 5, 10, 20 years ago still irritate me and annoy me today. Like, I still don't want to sit in traffic. I still don't
Yeah.
want a long line at Target with a slow, inept cashier. Like, those things still irritate and annoy me. The only difference is I allowed them to hijack my emotions when I was younger, and now I
Yeah.
no longer do. It's still not my preference to sit in traffic, but now when I sit in traffic, I can take a deep breath and I can go, okay, this is not my preference, but what's something I can do to make right now just a little bit better? So instead of white knuckling the steering wheel or honking the horn or just getting really, visibly frazzled and upset, now I just say, all right, the traffic is the traffic. The world's doing what the world does. I have no
Mhm.
control over that. So if I'm going to be sitting here for an extra 20 minutes, what can I do? Well, I can enjoy some stillness. I can listen to a podcast. I could call a friend. Like, there's a million options that even though I would prefer not to be in this situation, I am, and I'm not going to
Right.
fight against reality because that's a fight I will lose 100% of the time. So I'm going to accept it, and now I'm going to choose a response that actually moves me forward. And while I am far from perfect in choosing these responses, I am way better at it now than I've ever been at any previous time in my life. It is very rare that I get emotionally hijacked these days, but I still get triggered, annoyed, and frustrated dozens of times a day. I just don't let it dictate my behavior.
I'm so excited for your I'm glad you started talking about it. We'll talk about it more a little bit later, but I'm very, very excited for this book to come out. I think not only for me, but and maybe you've noticed that in your athlete life, we're so used to like we're reliving maybe that bad mistake, that error, and then you think, oh, you're done, move on. Well, then we got film, and normally that bad mistake is brought up again. And
Right.
so we're taught to move on, but also keep seeing those mistakes, keep replaying those. And so it can be hard to separate those two, and that can translate on later to life. And so I think, like you said, I've learned my kind of rule is the 24 to 48-hour rule, where it's, like you said, it might still make me very angry, but if I can take a deep breath and, maybe check in with myself in 24 hours or something, is that still bothering me? Okay, how do I need to address it now? So I think this book is going to be beneficial for me, but a lot of former and current athletes too.
I sure hope so. And there was some research that was done that said the average visceral emotion only lasts about 90 seconds. Like, when you
Mm,
find yourself really angry for being in traffic, if you just allow it to run through you and to process, you'll most likely only be angry for about 90 seconds. Now, what many people do is they keep replaying that over and over. They keep starting the
yes.
90-second clock over and over, and they find themselves irritated for the next 30 minutes, or in many people's cases, that can ruin their entire day. And think
Yeah.
about it from a logical and a conscious standpoint. I mean, how ridiculous is it for any of us to allow one bad moment to turn into a bad day? Like, that's just being
Right.
foolish. And I say that with a smile because I have done that more times than anyone could count when I was younger. But now I'm better at it. So it's the ability to separate those two things, to acknowledge that, yes, I'm allowed and I give myself permission to be irritated in this moment, but I'm
Yeah.
going to let it run through me with a level of acceptance, and I'm not going to keep starting that 90-second clock over and over again by thinking woe is me, or by thinking why is this happening to me, and then start blaming and complaining and making excuses, and then none of that is going to serve you. So I am in the business of, for myself and for those that I work with, is being intentional and purposeful and thoughtful in choosing responses that serve me and move me forward. And that's the whole premise of Next Play. And really, Next
Yeah.
Play, there's kind of three lenses that we want to look through. The one that I've historically talked about the most, and what I use as the example, is what we've already talked about here, which is in the micro, which is in the short term. You miss a shot, next play. You turn the ball over, next play. The referee doesn't call a foul, next play. And
Mhm.
that is really important in the micro. But what I've been equally fascinated by is looking at next play through the lens of the macro, is looking at it in our lives. We go through so many transitions where we are put in a different role or a different position, just through age and maturity and life experience. And then it's,
Yeah.
what is my next play going to be with these new circumstances? So just some of the common ones. You go from being in middle school to high school. You go from high school in many cases to college. You go from not working to then being an adult and having a job. You go from
Mhm.
being single to being married. You go from being married to having children. And then if you keep going down the line, oftentimes you go from having kids living with you to kids leaving and you're an empty nester. You go
Yeah.
from working to being retired. Now, those are many of the more pleasant transitions we go through. Well, there's also some that are not so pleasant. You identify as being an athlete and you tear your Achilles and you can no longer play. You fail out of school. You do a startup that goes out of business.
Yeah.
You get divorced. You go from having healthy parents to having sick and aging parents, or maybe parents that pass away. You go from having a job you love to being let go. So all of these different transitions that happen in life, some of them are somewhat controllable, and many of them are completely out of our control. But I like
Yeah.
looking at next play through the lens of, take any one of those scenarios, is, what is my next play going to be now that this is true? So what is
Mhm.
my next play going to be now that I am divorced? What is my next play going to be now that my children have graduated and moved out of the house? What is my next play going to be considering I got let go from my job yesterday? So that's the lens at which I like to look through. And then one other kind of way to process next play is with goal setting. So you set a goal, whether it's a short-term or a long-term goal. And if you hit the goal, that's wonderful. But what's your
Yeah.
next play going to be after that? And if you fall short of your goal, okay, not preferred, but it's still a reality. What's your next play going to be after you set a goal? So for me, the book is breaking down, looking at next play through those three lenses: in the short term, in the long term, and with goal setting.
Do you have a chance in your book to talk about, so with me with goal setting, I set them, reach them, and then there's always something else. There's never a rest period of, okay, you don't always have to, you have to live in, you accomplish that for a little bit, right? And now it's always reaching or you're never satisfied. Do you get a chance to dive into that this next book?
Well, yeah, and that's what the whole point is you've got to figure out for you personally, what is your recalibration, or what is your next play when you hit a goal. And like many,
Yeah.
many people that aspire to greatness and that are hard drivers, they experience exactly what you just said. They've set this goal, they've worked relentlessly towards it, they hit the goal, and then immediately it's like, all right, great, what's next? And
Yeah.
great. Other people might take a little more time to celebrate and to feel good about what they just accomplished. There is no right answer, and if there was, I
Yeah.
certainly don't have it. You just have to find the rhythm that you feel good about. Now, I know for me, um, when I was younger, and when I say younger, I mean all the way up into my early 40s. I'm almost 50 now, so really some of these. And I say this with a smile because it sounds so pretentious. Some of these more enlightened thoughts that I've had have really only
Yeah.
come about in the last 4 or 5 years. I mean, I spent 4.5 decades doing things backwards, doing things wrong, making some pretty boneheaded decisions. It's only been as of late that I've started to really course correct. But for me, um, I had so many self imposed limiting beliefs, and I never really stretched with my goal setting. Meaning, in my younger years, I accomplished almost every goal that I set. And I don't
Yeah.
say that with pride. I say that because I was too scared to set really big, lofty goals. I set
Yeah.
I set goals that I unconsciously knew I would be able to hit, and I hit them pretty frequently. Well, the last
Mhm.
couple of years, I've really tried to change that. I've really tried to set, uncomfortable long-term goals, uncomfortable stretch goals, and right now I'm actually pleased that I probably only hit my goals about half of the time. I mean, it's literally a coin flip, but that actually makes me feel better because I know I'm going in the right direction. I know that I'm not going to hit every goal, and that's a good thing because I'm really stretching myself and pushing myself. But I have to make sure that I know that when I do set a goal and I hit it, wonderful. But what's
Yeah.
let's play after that? And if I set a goal and I fall short, that's okay too. But what's my next play going to be? Am I going to continue to pursue that goal? Am I going to just extend the timeline a little bit? Am I going to, look at it and go, okay, well, maybe this wasn't the right goal in the first place. I need to pivot and change a little bit. And all of these are viable perspectives to have. But every time you hit or fall short of a goal, you have to ask yourself what's the next play. And to your point before, you don't have to do that in the moment. Like
Yeah.
if you set a year-long revenue goal for your business and you hit it, like you're allowed to take a couple days and enjoy that. You're allowed to celebrate in whatever fashion you feel is appropriate. But then
Yeah.
after a couple days, you probably need to move on to the next play. I would not recommend riding off into the sunset off of reaching that one goal. But
Right.
it doesn't have to be everything in the moment. It doesn't have to
Yeah.
be, I've been working for a year. I just hit this goal. 3 seconds later, I have to be on to something else. Now, if that's
Yeah.
your preference and that's how you want to operate, nothing wrong with that. But I just want people to be very thoughtful, purposeful, and intentional in these systems that they set up in their life.
I like you talked a little bit about it in raising your game, and then I'm assuming with this sneak peek, you're going to talk about it more in next play of just we can set those goals. And if you're reaching every single, how high are these goals? Are they really pushing your limits? Or are you still, if you ask your subconscious, are you still saying playing in that safe zone? And that one really hit home too of just yeah, they can seem, really big in my head, or maybe you say it's to some trusted people and it seems big, but do you kind of know, like, are you getting a yes? Are there people you asking that you know? Or so, like you said, being able to push yourself a little bit too with goal setting, I think I'm excited to read more about that as well.
Yeah, we've got to continue to stretch. We've got to continue to push. And to me, that's for me personally, and everyone is allowed to have their own ratio and their own whatever they feel comfortable with. But for me,
Yeah,
50-50 on reaching my goals is a pretty good balance for me. It means
yeah,
hitting them enough that I'm continuing to feel that satisfaction, feel that success, and use that to propel myself forward. But it's also keeping me humble enough to know that hey, I can't go through life with the cruise control on. I've got to continue to work and continue to strive. And it's like most things. It doesn't mean that it's always at 50-50. That's
yeah,
just kind of over time. If you were to zoom back out, that's kind of what you'd see. Sometimes I'm on a little bit of a heater and I accomplish 3 or 4 goals in a row and things are going well. And then other times I'm in a little bit of a slump and I'm fall short on 3 or 4 goals in a row. But over the big picture, hitting 3 or 4 and then missing 3 or 4 still equates to 50-50. So in the big picture, it's all the same, but it doesn't mean that it's always a coin flip or that you're alternating hit it, didn't, hit it, didn't, hit it, didn't. So I just look at big picture trends for me.
talking about raising your game
Yep.
and moving into your new book. Are there any more takeaways or things that you could talk about that are differences between this book? If someone read Raise Your Game, is it still beneficial for them to read Next Play?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, and and funny enough, there's a book in between the two that commercially didn't sell very well, so it's okay if you haven't read it because hardly anybody else has. So I wrote Raise Your Game, which is how we achieve, optimal excellence in our lives. Kind of
Mhm.
how do we make the climb to the top of the mountain? And then I followed that up with a book called Sustain Your Game, which is what do we need to do to maintain excellence for long periods of time? How do we
Yeah.
beat stagnation and avoid burnout and handle stress like we were just talking about? And funny enough, I actually think, you know, uh, Sustain Your Game is just as, if not a better book than Raise Your Game. It just didn't do commercially very well, which I learned a good lesson on. But no, Next Play is really, it's not a part of a trilogy, but it's very
Okay.
much in alignment with the same principles and same overall philosophy. In fact, in both Raise Your Game and Sustain Your Game, I mean, I talk about the concept of next play. What I decided to do this time was the first two books, Raise Your Game and Sustain Your Game, are your traditional nonfiction, 75,000 words, 15 chapters, 270-page books like that everybody writes. Next play
Yeah.
by design is much more concise. Next play is about a third of the page count, about a third of the word count. It's only around 25,000 words.
Okay.
And it only goes really deep into the one topic of next play. As you know from reading Raise Your Game and Sustain Your Game, they're more of a collage of principles that talk about several different ideas in performance and leadership, where next play is very singularly focused and only talks about that one concept. And if someone were to listen to the audiobooks, the Raise Your Game audiobook, I think, is 8.5 hours long. The audiobook for Next Play is right at the 3 hour mark. So like I said, it's about a third of the size. And I just wanted to see if going deeper on one specific topic in a more
Yeah.
concise manner actually resonated better with folks than writing something a little bit more broad. So I wanted to try that. And then we'll see. I'll give it a year or two after Next Play comes out, gather feedback, which is very important. And then I'll decide, what I'll do for a future book in the moving forward. Do I want to pick another topic and go really deep in a concise manner, or do I want to go back to something that's a little broader? So we'll see. But I'm very proud of all three books, and they're all very much in alignment, and they were all written in a way that you could read them in any order you want. You could read Sustain Your Game first and then Next Play and finish with Raise Your Game, and you'd be just as fine. So they're not sequential.
We have two more questions for you. One is a new one. One is what I ask my every member who comes on here. But if you could wish people knew something else besides you being a keynote speaker, being in the sports performance world, what is something that you wish people knew more about?
Well, they probably already know this. So once again, I don't want this to sound pretentious, but I wish they would know that all of this stuff I'm talking about, I haven't mastered myself. Like, I'm not
Yeah.
try and be some self-proclaimed guru. I'm trying to share all of the things that I've really struggled with and been challenged with over the course of my life. Now, what I will say is, while I'm not coming from a place of mastery on any of this stuff, I am
Hmm.
from a place of progress, and I am coming from a place of improvement. And I am so proud that I am able to implement the next play mentality today better than I was able to 5 years ago, and better than I was able to 10 years ago. And all of the components of Raise Your Game and Sustain Your Game, I'm getting better at them. Once again, only if we zoom out. You can catch me on a bad day having a bad moment, and I might have taken a step backwards, but generally
Yeah.
speaking, the trajectory of my life and the way I'm showing up is going up and to the right, which is exactly where I want it to be going. But I say that because even though people bring me in to speak and to do some coaching and to write and put stuff out on social, I'm not a master of any of this stuff. I'm
Hmm.
still challenged, still working on all this. And I say that because I want anyone else that's watching or listening to give themselves some grace, give themselves permission to be less than perfect, to be fallible, to know you are going to say and do some stupid things. You're going to boneheaded decisions. There are going to be times where you allow yourself to get emotionally hijacked. There are going to be times where you feel stressed. There are going to be times where you let a bad moment turn into a bad hour or a bad morning. Give yourself grace and space to be less than perfect, but just make sure that generally speaking, you are moving in the right direction in the long term.
As a perfectionist, I needed to hear that a little bit. It can be hard to know that, mistakes happen. You can beat yourself up. So, leaving our audience with one more piece of advice, if you're able to, for anyone feeling stuck in their sport or after their sport, what is one habit that they can start this week that aligns with the best version of themselves?
Remember, feeling stuck is just that. It's a feeling. It's not an actual truth. So you may have evidence that you've been somewhat stagnant or that your wheels are spinning or that you're stuck, but it's not a permanent truth. So do the best you can not to keep telling yourself that story or not to keep writing that narrative. One of the rules I have for myself, and I try to model it for my children and everyone that I'm around, is never say anything out loud that doesn't serve you. We cannot control our thoughts. Our thoughts are just about as random as anything. We can't control what we think, but we can
Yeah,
always control what we say. We can always control what we do with those thoughts, how we respond to them, and so forth. So once again, and this is a perfect, full circle moment to put a big red bow tie on everything that we've been talking about. There's nothing wrong with feeling stuck. I know it's not
yeah.
pleasant. I know it's not preferred. I know it's uncomfortable. There's nothing wrong with feeling stuck. But if you continue to behave in a manner that continues feeling stuck, or you continue to make decisions that keeps you stuck, well, that's on you now. So it's okay for you to feel that way, but let's start making decisions in the moment that can help get us unstuck. And even the smallest decision or the smallest step forward can create just a little bit of momentum to help unwedge us and then get us moving forward.
Thank you so much, Alan. Is there anything else you'd like to leave our audience with, where they can get your book, where they can find more information about what you do?
Well, my main hub is my website, which is alansteinjr.com. And that's if anyone's interested in any of my speaking programs, in person or virtual. It also has links to all of my social channels, which is just at Alan Stein Jr. I take a lot of pride in being very accessible and very responsive on social. There's also links to get any of the books, including Next Play, which will come out on November 4th from the website. But you can also search for any of the three books on Amazon or Audible or wherever you get your books and audiobooks. And this was a lot of fun. I enjoyed this conversation. If anyone watching or listening has a question or wants to share something or wants to keep the conversation going, please shoot me a DM on Instagram or LinkedIn, or shoot me an email. I'd be happy to get back to you.
I learned even more through this, so I know our audience will. For anyone listening, please make sure that you check out his books. I mean, they definitely, I have pages and pages of notes, have inspired me to be a better person and coach in my aspect. And I know that others can take away so many things from these as well. So make sure to share this with friends, family, and coaches, and like and subscribe. We will be back.